It's a beautiful summer morning in Paris. I'm running along the Seine. I can feel the dewy earth squish beneath my feet. And up ahead, I see the Eiffel Tower, lit up in the sunrise, which fills the sky with pink and gold and yellow. And all of this beauty seems to be mocking me. I feel sick and weak and disgusting. But I continue running anyway. And up ahead, I notice this dip in the ground and think to myself, that looks like a cradle. A couple of minutes later, dizziness overwhelms me. I collapse in that cradle. And when I come to sometime later, observing blood and dirt in my mouth, my first thought is, oh no, does dirt have calories? I was 5 years old when I began having thoughts I kept secret. My mom had bought me these purple sweatpants with white puffy hearts all over them. Who else remembers puff paints? They were so cool. And I was so excited to wear these pants. But I knew they had to pass my mirror test first. So I pulled them on and I raced upstairs where no one would see me. And I knelt down in front of a wall mirror to see how far my thighs would spread in the pants. This would determine whether I would wear the pants, and if I did, whether or not I would kneel down around others during story time. I kept these thoughts private because I sensed they weren't appropriate to share, or that they might make others feel bad about their own bodies. See, I didn't judge other people's appearances, but for some reason, I couldn't stop judging my own. I also couldn't seem to change much about my body. Every now and then, I would try to eat less, but I loved food too much. So much so that when I was really little and my parents were tucking me in at night, I'd ask them what we would eat for breakfast the next morning so I could dream about it. As I approached my teens, something ironic happened. People started to tell me that I could be a model. I was shocked, so much so that at first I thought they were making a cruel joke. And then I wondered if they were just being polite, trying to make me feel better about myself. I was in Minnesota after all. There's a reason they've coined the term Minnesota nice. But the idea of modeling thrilled me, so I pursued it in Minneapolis, and I loved it straight away. For some reason, before the cameras, I could shed my insecurities and morph into this confident performer. Better yet, no one said anything about my perceived weight problem. Not my agents, not clients, not other models. And I began to wonder if these thoughts about my body were all in my head. Maybe I was okay just the way I was. Then one day, a renowned photographer flew in from Los Angeles. And after this long and glorious day of shooting, he looked me in the eyes and said, "You could be modeling in Paris if you lost 10 or 15 pounds." All of my fears were validated. But I also had this motivation. Nothing would stop me now. I started eating more fruits and vegetables and exercising before school. And as I began to see the number on the scale dip down, I will never forget that feeling. It was like getting an A+ on the most difficult test you had ever taken. After high school, I was offered a modeling contract in New York City with one of the world's top agencies. While living there, those few pounds turned into a few more and a few more as weight control took over my life. And the next year, that photographer proved right. I was less of me, and I was modeling in Paris. And that one morning during a routine run, I collapsed, and when I came to observing blood and dirt in my mouth, my first thought was not about my well-being. How long have I been here? Who will help me? Will I survive this? But oh no, does dirt have calories? Shortly after, I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa, which has the highest mortality rate of all psychiatric illnesses. A day or two later, I called my agent in Paris and said, "I'm going home." And she said, "Well, why?" And I said the first thing to come to mind, which for some reason was, "I have food poisoning." Anorexia had taken a lot of me, but apparently not my dark sense of humor. Back in Minnesota, I attempted numerous forms of treatment and resisted every one, holding staunchly to this belief that if I could just be good enough, smart enough, strong enough, I could be as thin as I wished and happy at the same time. It seemed utopian. But my body and soul couldn't take the starvation much longer. One day, one of my worst nightmares came true. I was home alone and could not stop thinking about this turtle fudge brownie ice cream. In the freezer, it had caramel swirls and these little chunks of brownie, and the ice cream was chocolate, which is my favorite. I hadn't even eaten chocolate in Paris. Who goes to Paris and doesn't eat chocolate? I deserve this, I told myself. One bite can't hurt. So I crept to the freezer as though I was committing this horrible crime. And I pulled the ice cream out and I placed the spoon in and put the sweet dollop on my tongue. And as it sat there, my whole body filled with delight. But that one bite turned into another and another and another and another until I had consumed the entire half-gallon. This started a vicious cycle of binging so intensely I would enter this trance-like state and not fully realize how much I had eaten until I found myself sobbing in wrappers and crumbs and attempts to compensate for calories taken in. As I put on weight, people started to tell me how healthy I looked, not realizing I felt sicker than ever on the inside. One night, after a gargantuan binge, like the mother of all binges, I decided to consume a poisonous substance to make myself vomit. It was my go-to SOS strategy for worst-case scenarios, and to me, this was my worst-case scenario. This putrid rock in my stomach had to come out. So I raced to this cupboard to find the poison, and I looked inside, and it was not there. And in a panic, I rushed around the house with my heart pounding, searching for this poison, but it was gone. And it struck me that without my go-to SOS strategy in that moment, all I could do was be with me, which is a really scary thing when you're in a dark place. And as I sat there being with myself, it dawned on me that this was my entire life. My sole purpose was to binge and restrict and obsess and punish. This wasn't a life. I saw two choices. I could end it all right there. Or I could choose to live differently. I had nothing to lose by trying and everything to lose by not. So I pulled myself together and I walked to my wall mirror and I looked not at my hips or my thighs or my belly, but straight into my eyes and said, "This is not who you are." I vowed that for 1 year I would make no attempts at weight control. No matter how much I binged, I'd eat the next meal and the next meal. I cut all the size tags out of my clothes. I trashed my scale, along with health magazines that touted the latest celebrity diet and ways to get flatter abs, because none of that was living. I studied mindfulness started listening to my body rather than eating by numbers on packages. I took a women's sexuality course and for the first time began to see my body as beautiful and capable and worthy of pleasure. And on my dark days, of which there were many, 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 I asked myself how I would treat a beloved friend until gradually, finally, I became her. Whenever I tell my story, somebody inevitably asks, "What was your lowest weight? How much did you gain when you were binging? Were you actually a chubby kid?" I imagine many of you had these questions. And that's okay, trust me, I get it. We are all taught that the numbers matter. But here's the thing, they don't. Beauty is not a size. I'm sure we're all familiar with this idea that what really matters is on the inside. I share my story today with hopes you'll hear it differently. Because none of us are immune to the messages that suggest our details matter more than we do. No, they don't. You are not your net worth, or how much money you have in the bank, or your body fat percentage, or your height, or your age, or how popular you are on social media. Your character, your sense of humor, your sense of style, your passions and curiosities, all those quirks that make you who you are, none of that is quantifiable. Beauty is not a size. If you find yourself in a dark place, paralyzed by messages that suggest otherwise, I urge you to practice self-compassion. Be with yourself. Look within. I promise you there is so much wonder to be embraced there. Thank you so much.